on this gray afternoon. So it's 5:01. Welcome to the Thursday, August 17th Nantucket Conservation Meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members who are present can be heard. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal.
Yes, here.
Tim Brain.
Here.
Mike, Seth Engelborg.
Here.
Joe Pandowski.
Here.
Linda Williams.
Here.
This meeting is being held entirely remotely, so all participants are participating via Zoom. Public may participate via YouTube. There are directions on the town's website as to how to join. If anybody wishes to speak, please raise your hand either in your camera window or virtually and wait to be recognized by the chair. Please state your name and any relationship you might have to the project before speaking. Please keep your device muted when you're not speaking so that you're not picked up by the recording or creating a distraction. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We'll start the meeting with public comment on items not being heard this evening. And hearing nothing, we'll move on to public meeting notices of intent. The following are continued. Local. Hello?
Sorry, can I interrupt for 1 minute?
Yes, who was that?
That was Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to point out to everybody, I know it's come up a couple times. We distributed some general public comment from Deanne Atherton recently in relation to some of the work and kind of that continued discussion for 79 Baxter Road. I know she's not on right now to say anything, but I just wanted to say she had some questions in there. I thought it would be prudent if we just had a general discussion. I know we've tentatively scheduled a kind of a Baxter Road discussion for September the 21st, just to add that project into that discussion on the 21st as well. If that is at the
Great, thank you, Jeff.
pleasure of the board. I just wanted to acknowledge that we had that public comment come in too.
Thank you. So moving on to continuances, the following are continued. Local Boyd Properties LLC, 15 Loretta Lane, until August the 31st. The trustees of Reservations Cascada Cotu Wildlife Refuge, continued until August the 31st. Nantucket Conservation Foundation, West Hummock Pond, continued until September the 28th. TAC 3 LLC, 26 Washington Street, continued until August 31st. 78 Walwinet Road LLC, 78 Walwinet Road, continued until September 31st. August 31st, excuse me. And then for amended orders of conditions, Doherty ACK LLC, 2 Mariners Way, continued until August 31st. On that note,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
excuse me for a minute. I wanted to, I know it's not on the agenda, but it's been continued. Last meeting, we had to schedule a site visit on 78 Walwinet Road, and then the joint meeting with the HDC interfered with that. So I still would like to have Jeff help us if he can with a site visit for that prior to the next meeting.
Yes, we will have that scheduled, Mark, for Monday, August the 28th.
Yeah, I was there today in anticipation of the meeting, and there's absolutely no clue that anything is going on there. There's no survey marks, and I'm sure Arthur can help us with that when the time comes.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll
that's it.
get it all squared away and gussied up for the 28th.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry to interrupt.
Not at all, Mark, and thank you for bringing it up. So great, we'll all meet out there on Monday. So Art, you're on for the Linda Loring Nature Foundation 90 Eel Point Road.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm recused from this.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the applicant, Arthur Gasparo, as well as Seth Wilkinson and Sarah Boyce are all on as well. And this is a really exciting project that we had presented to you some time ago. And then we've continued for a period of time while botanical surveys were conducted to address some requests for additional information by Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. And that work has been done and the reports filed with Natural Heritage. They had issued a conditional letter of no take, which we're of course amenable to accept all of those conditions in our order. And then just to back up and briefly run through the project and refresh your memories, this is to remove some dilapidated structures down at the edge of the north end of Long Pond, and to engage in a fairly significant restoration project. And really, I think it goes beyond restoration. I think could be properly described as an enhancement project for all of the interests protected by the commission in this area. And certainly we believe represents a significant net benefit through the both removal of the structures as well as the restoration and land management activities that are proposed. The other aspect of the project is a proposed pier to head out into the pond, primarily for the purposes of facilitating the educational program, and as well as water quality monitoring that the foundation does in the pond. And this pier is very similar to the configuration that the commission permitted and the land bank constructed on Long Pond. And like that project, we believe this could be done with minimal impact and tied to the overall benefit of this area, allowing access down to the water for those purposes, without just having people sort of going up and down on the bank and at the shoreline. We're happy to provide additional specifics on the project should you have any questions. And like I said, both Seth and Sarah are also here, probably more capable than I to answer questions specific to the plants and the restoration and how we would go about that should you have any questions. But we have established a pretty strict protocol and establishment of areas of limit of work and how this will be done and to remove the structures and the restoration. But again, any questions, we'd be happy to try to address those.
Thank you, Art. Questions from my fellow commissioners? Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Art, I'm assuming that the moratorium on docks and piers does not apply to freshwater.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Did you ask about chapter 91? Was that the?
No, not chapter 91, the town moratorium on docks and piers.
Oh, you would ask that. That's correct. No, it does not. It's to the harbors.
Only salt water, not fresh.
Yeah, I believe I could get you the specific answer to that, but it does not apply. I mean,
Thank you.
I can say
Thank you, Art. I had a feeling, but thank you.
Any other questions? Because Mark is mirroring my own, not dismay exactly. I mean, I'm all for this project, but I've said time and time again how I sort of like to keep things minimal, especially when it comes to railings and piers. And I remember we had this discussion before where it was sort of presented as something that you had to do. So is there absolutely no way of making it less obtrusive, or, that's my question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think that in this particular case, we really are relying on those railings for safety purposes. They've got a lot of young children, and I certainly Ms. Boyes maybe could expand on that if needed, but they can't have kids falling off or the pier, and it's really to help contain sort of that activity. We did agree, as you may recall, that the stair, to your concern, I believe this came up at the first hearing as well, that the steps going down, so near the bank, the terraced part, we could not have the railings there. And that's really where we would anticipate the wildlife movement, more than over the water sheet where we actually would have the railings. So I understand from a visual perspective, but I think that with respect to, movement of wildlife and those sort of protected interests, that the design does meet those performance standards.
So and thank you, Art. And but so what is the platform going to be used for?
Sarah, do you want to take that?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for that question, Ian. So primarily it's for access to the water at this northern edge for public access for our programming. And the programming includes like work with children, work with adults. As some of our education programs, they go for the, through the whole lifelong learning program. We don't currently have anywhere that we can bring the public to access the pond. The work we're doing with Seth Wilkinson and Wilkinson Ecological is really opening up, removing a lot of the non-native species on the bank and kind of creating an area where we can have access to or reinstate the access to the pond that existed. Exposing the stairs you see on the map that was on the screen share before had existing stone steps that went down to the water. And so it's the programming piece, education about the pond, the importance of pond health and our great ponds, geologic history of the great ponds of Nantucket, all the different aspects that we educate about. And then also all the water quality work that we're doing. Currently, we only our staff can go down there. We bring kayaks out onto the water to collect water samples, but this is a way, having a pier will help us bring more people and involve more people in that work to be immersive. And the only other thing I want to point out is if you saw the map or if you have it in front of you that was on there before of the pier, it's actually not very visible into the water. So there's the natural shape of the bank of the pond right there kind of dips in. I don't have it. If you want to put it back up, that'd be great. But if not, that's fine if you have it in front of you. So like the pier doesn't extend very far into the, like it's the view. Yeah. So it extends out a bit, but so much of it is actually the shoreline is blocking the visual. You're not going to be anywhere along the pond where you would see like the pier sticking out into the water, I guess is what I'm saying. If that helps with some of the view shed concerns, Ian.
Well, it does, Sarah, and thank you. And I look forward to coming out when you have it constructed and enjoying it. So, and thank you for addressing my concerns. Jeff?
So I was just going to confirm what Art said. I actually had it handy for this. That prohibition is a zoning prohibition, so it's not really super germane to our discussion, but just to let everybody know, it only prohibits new docks or piers on what they call shorefront land. And shorefront land, by their definition, is required to touch the Atlantic Ocean, Nantucket Sound, Nantucket Harbor, Pulpus Harbor, or Madigan Harbor. So ponds are exempt from that zoning provision for new docks and piers.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for fleshing that out. So, seeing no more questions, does any member of the public want to chime in? And if not, Would you like to close, Art?
Yes, please.
And Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
All good.
Great. Do I hear a motion to close?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So Linda, I'm afraid Mark and Joe beat you to the post. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Art.
everybody.
So that moves us on to Nantucket Islands Land Bank, multiple locations. Rachel Freeman. Rachel?
Hi, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say I'm recused from this too. Sorry to interrupt you, Rachel.
You're a busy guy, aren't you? So,
Thank you very much. I still do not have any communication from Natural Heritage, and I'm wondering if, Jeff, you have heard any communication as well.
As of about 60 seconds ago, no.
Okay, so we will unfortunately be continuing this as well.
okay. Thank you, Rachel. So continuing until August 31st.
Yes, please.
And that brings us on to Ford Codfish Park. So, and I guess I should say the Nantucket Islands Land Bank Ford Codfish Park. So you're still on.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I'm here with the Nantucket Islands Land Bank to represent a notice of intent for maintenance at our property at 4 Codfish Park Road. It is known colloquially as the Codfish Park Playground. And this park was installed in 2016. And it's a small property, about 4/10 of an acre, and was acquired by gift from the Wisconsin Trust in 1995. This has historically always been a site of a playground, but the improvements that were made in 2016 brought it to where we are today. A portion of the playground falls within the buffer to a dune, which is located across the street, and resource area, I should say. And therefore, we are bringing this request to the commission tonight. We have ongoing maintenance needs at this park, where in particular, what we have right now is a stone dust path that leads down from a brick patio. And the stone dust path repeatedly washes out into the playground itself, and we have to be replacing it all the time. We are requesting permission to replace the stone dust with an extension of the brick in this area, and simply bringing it down and replacing the stone dust all with brick so that it doesn't wash out. At the same time, we have a similar issue, albeit slightly different, with a rubberized tile path, which is supposed to be ADA compliant, but the tiles are constantly pushing up against each other and making quite an uneven walking surface. And we are requesting permission to exchange the rubber tiles for a single piece of pour-in place, which is functionally the same material. We did go a little further and ensure that the pour-in place that we are requesting to use does not have any sort of forever chemicals associated with it, as that was a concern for us. And so we included that in your packet. These are maintenance projects, and I am happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions? Seth? You're muted. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rachel, to addressing the PFAS concern, because I was going to bring that up. I have before me here a news article that I can circulate to the staff that is talking about pour-in-place rubber surfaces for playgrounds. And it says that although it may depend on the manufacturer, some of them have chemicals of concern like polyaromatic hydrocarbons, phthalates, and VOCs. So I haven't done enough research into the specific one that you're proposing to use, but I was just wondering if before we move forward, we could get some more specific details on that surface. And if it is deemed to be something of concern, I don't know if there are alternate materials out there. I totally understand the need for a stable surface there. And I've seen the one at the Old South Road playground. I think it works well. But I wouldn't want us to be accidentally putting chemicals of any sort, whether they're PFAS or anything else, into an area of sensitive environmental impact, and also something that's going to be used by kids on a daily basis. So I'm just hoping for a little bit more details, or possibly some type of chemical monitoring plan that could be put into place. Thank you.
So, Rachel, would you like to respond?
Certainly, I want to make sure that the commissioners received the information we submitted from both the manufacturer of the pour in place itself, which is Surface America, and actually the manufacturer who manufactures for them is a company called Ecor, and that's the parent company of Surface America, as well as a letter from APT, who they use for their binder. Was that something that the commission received in their packet?
We did, and it's on page 41.
Okay.
And
So just to review, what it says is, it goes through that's concerned with the health and safety of all its employees and customers. Ecor has periodic testing performed for an extensive list of hazardous chemicals to support the statement that Ecor products do not contain any substances listed on the REACH candidate list. And it goes through a couple lists in any levels above 0.1%. And that includes items such as VOCs, PAHs, and heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, arsenic, and mercury. And so we considered this as sufficient. I'm happy to go further if you feel like you have specific questions that you'd like me to answer. It does go through a list of chemicals that it is referring to. So because we did specifically ask exactly what Seth was asking about, because we know that this is something that's of concern. And it has been in the news quite a bit lately. It was most recently in the New York Times, I think this past weekend. But if there's specific questions beyond that I'm happy to answer. I think water sampling, I'm not exactly sure. I'm just off the top of my head how we would go about doing that at this site. But I'm happy to answer anything else.
thank you, Rachel. Seth, do you have a follow-up question or?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I didn't read this as well as I should have, so I appreciate that. And I think that assuages my concerns. Thank you.
Great. Tim, did you have a question?
I was just going to agree with Seth, what he said before, and I'm going to agree with what he said just now. I think it looks like it's pretty well researched. And just to comment, I walk by that playground at least twice a week. It's fantastic and it's really busy, which is great. So.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
have friends who live right above it, and they can attest to how busy and popular it is. So,
Yeah, it's become very, very popular.
yeah. So, Rachel, are there any problems with runoff during storms with these sort of covers?
With pour in place specifically, or
Yeah. So is it a continuous sort of mat? Where does the rain go?
it is a continuous mat, but this is actually just replacing the rubberized tile path, which
Okay,
goes
so it drains
around. So
through.
it's sand on all sides.
Yeah.
So there's lots of places for the water to go other than in this one area. This just provides accessibility to the different structures. But it is just it's a path that winds through the playground, not the entire thing. The entire thing will remain sand.
Great. Any other questions? Or any questions from members of the public? So seeing none. Rachel, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
And do I hear a motion to close? Joe? Do I hear a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Actually, Linda, Tim pipped you to that post, so by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
So that brings us on to Squam Partners LLC, 89 Squam Road. Art?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Arthur Gasparo for the applicant at 89 Squam Road, along with Arthur Reed. And this is the second public hearing for the application for residential development in the southern or the western portion of the property at 89 Squam Road. Jeff, we're not sure if you're there.
Sorry, wrong
Nope,
screen.
you don't need to apologize. Just wasn't sure if you knew, but that's fine.
I was sharing my other screen that the Zoom was on and not the screen with the plan.
This is, we had an approval, as you may recall, for an order of conditions for the construction of the structure at the same location, same footprint that had expired, and the septic and well had been installed. So those are existing in this area. And we have a current notice of intent application to re-permit that same structure, and then have also added a swimming pool and a patio to go along with that. We've established a limit of work and silt fencing, which is shown in green on the plan. There was some questions at the last hearing with respect to the depth of the pool, and so we updated the plan. And I think there's actually this might have been the original plan, and there's a subsequent plan that we had filed where we specifically put on that plan the groundwater elevation that had been observed, and then we have added that there would be, we've reduced the depth of the proposed pool so that it's only 5.5 feet, so that we would be at least a half a foot above the observed groundwater elevation. That groundwater elevation was also based upon redoxamorphic features and in the soil, essentially colorations. And we submitted the soil logs as well that showed you that we had used a large excavator when we did the soil test. Actually went down about 19 and 20 feet and didn't actually encounter any actual groundwater. So I think based upon all of those reasons, having the bottom of the structure within the 2-foot separation, but more than a half foot above those soil colorations, will not have an adverse impact or effect on the protected interests. Thank you. So that's the most recent information. And so we just wanted to show you how deep we actually went without running into groundwater out there. And we don't anticipate any difficulty with the installation of that pool or interception of that pool with actual groundwater. With that, I hope that meets the concerns and the questions the commission had raised at the last meeting, and we would be happy to try to address anything additional that you might have.
Thank you, Art. Questions? Mark,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Art, thank you for being responsive to my concerns with the groundwater and the pool depth. I appreciate that, and just wanted to thank you for it.
Certainly.
any other questions? So I guess I'm puzzled, Art, as to why, if you didn't hit groundwater as you were digging down, why was there the discoloration? What do you think caused it?
So it's not uncommon for the soil conditions, especially in this area of the island where you've got ice contact deposits going back to the glacial age, where you've got a fair amount of fine material, which is often silty loams, and the colorations are caused by the movement of the water down through that soil. In some cases, you do end up with a perched water table in these areas, and that is why, you know, there are those wetlands that exist throughout the swamp type area, you know, swamp area. So it's a perched water table, you know, in this area. But again, we haven't actually encountered the water during our testing. The installation of the fire tank that you saw there, we didn't hit any water. The septic tank, the septic system. So I think in this area, it's simply colorations in the soil, perhaps related to the downward movement of that of groundwater. But again, we're using a Title V standard for soil evaluation and establishment of groundwater. We feel like it's a conservative approach. But we used it for the separation distance for the bottom of the septic system, which we stayed 5 feet above that elevation with. So it only seemed appropriate to me to use that same data for work that's proposed in the buffer zone.
Thank you. Any further questions or any questions from members of the public? Would you like to close, Art?
Yes, please.
Jeff, we have everything we need to close.
Yes, you do.
Motion to close. Joe? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Linda. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to Hawks End LLC, Esser Island.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. They requested a continuance to 8/31 as well.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, it just missed the last time we posted it and sent it around. So
Thanks, Jeff. So Art, you're on again with ACK Hang 10 LLC, 21 Meter Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're before you tonight with an application for residential development on a vacant lot to construct a single-family dwelling and a garage within land subject to coastal storm flowage. The structure will be compliant with all building codes for work within the flood zone. There is no change of grade that's proposed. The driveway would be a semi-pervious gravel driveway with just a hard apron to the asphalt road as required by the zoning bylaw. And we believe the project meets all relevant performance standards. That being said, I am, you know, sure we're all aware, familiar with this property, which had the rain garden constructed that you can see on the plan, and we had provided a report of the existing conditions of that rain garden. And it's been constructed and planted and seeded with the appropriate mix, and it's growing. It could use a little bit more, I think, time for full germination, but the retaining walls that you may recall, again, this is related to the other order of conditions, but were removed, and that site restored per that order of conditions. We just saw a letter from the land council with some concerns. Again, I believe those are not necessarily pertinent to the proposed house that's being constructed. And we believe the rain garden and that work was done in compliance. We did see that they had raised concern with a pipe that had been installed in the road, not on this property. And so we would address that. There was conduits that were put in for to provide power to this property within the asphalt road that was cut. And the owner did put a pipe on top of the other conduits that served as a drain pipe. We understand that if there are concerns with that, we could cap that pipe. Again, it wasn't done on this property. It was done in the road with the belief that it would help to move the water, and essentially that water was going sitting in the road and puddling, and with enough overflow would have been the same water that flowed into that catch basin anyway. But nonetheless, if that is of concern, we can certainly address that. And we'd be happy to address any questions related to the project to construct the house.
Thank you, Art. Before I move to questions from members of the public, do commissioners have any questions to ask on this? Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Art. So I have a variety of things, but I'll start off with saying that for those of you on the commission or in the public who haven't been involved in the few previous applications on or near the site, there is this ongoing concern that there may be a isolated vegetated wetland on site in addition to the land subject to coastal storm flowage. So that point needs to be cleared up. And the burden of proof to show that that resource area does not exist on site is on the applicant per our regulations. But I think this would also be a great opportunity to use our third-party review function and to have a third-party reviewer assess both the conditions on site, the current application, the previous application for 21 Meter Street, and also the application at 46 Union Street, in which this potential wetland was called out. So I'd request staff to engage a third-party review process to start to analyze whether that resource area exists on site. Before getting into too much detail about that, and I think it's been said in previous hearings, but we have to get it into the record for this hearing. Should that resource area exist on site, then obviously the performance standards for the proposed project are much different than the performance standards as showed with a project that's solely land subject to coastal storm flowage. And I'd also request staff, if you're able to, pull up the orders of condition page for the previous notice of intent on this site. Do you have that available?
I do. You just gotta give me 1 second to let it load.
Sure.
I think I can share it. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep. So in this application, it looks like it was SE 3611. If you go down to additional finding number 4, I'm just going to read it out. It says the commission finds that based upon historic photographic evidence and evidence taken at the site indicating high groundwater, there are characteristics indicative of freshwater meadows and marshes and or meadows existing on site. So freshwater marshes and meadows fall under the vegetated wetlands resource area, both within the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Nantucket wetland protection regulations. And at the time of this application, the intent was that because of the heavy disturbance that had taken place over this on this site, and it was a result of an enforcement order, that the conditions on site at that exact moment were hard to determine if there was or was not that resource area on site. But there was enough evidence to indicate that it's very likely that that resource area did exist on site. I know that myself and the conservation agent at the time went to the site and took some soil samples using a soil auger, and we found elevation, or we found standing water within like 10 inches of the surface. And if you look at our regulations for vegetated wetlands, that's actually one of the characteristics that indicates that it could be a vegetated wetland just based on the shallow depth of groundwater found. So, I mean, I'm not going to go too much farther down this point, but I think we don't have the appropriate information from the applicant at this time to close the hearing without showing the burden of proof that no vegetated wetland exists on that site. So I request the applicant to provide us additional information, and I would request the staff to initiate a third-party review to identify whether this resource area exists or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth, for
Mr. Chair, could I speak to Seth's comment? Because I think it's important to just deal with that jurisdictional issue up front.
certainly, Glenn.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Chair,
No.
but I think Seth raises a point that is frankly a curveball that we surely didn't expect to hear tonight whatsoever. I think legally, the prior order of conditions is binding as to resource areas. And the commission in that order of conditions did not find that there's a bylaw or a Wetlands Protection Act resource area. They only found land subject to coastal storm flowage. That OOC is binding for 3 years on the commission and everyone. And just because the commission made some passing notation in your OOC is not a determination of a resource area. The resource area was not checked, and the OOC is binding. So Seth's legally completely incorrect. There's no need for third-party review. We're not going to do it. And if you want an opinion from anyone, get it from town council. We're happy to continue, obviously, because that's not going to be settled this evening, but you voted and did not find in your OOC, you have to determine in your OCs the resource areas that exist on the property in the pending hearing process. There's only land subject to coastal storm flowage, and it's good for 3 years. So this point is moot.
Thank you, Glenn. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
oh, you're welcome. And so for those of us who are present, of course, there was David Haynes' opinion and abutters' opinions as to what had been there before the site was severely altered. And I think the orders of conditions reflected our difficulty going forward at that time. And from And so before I ask Jeff to weigh in, I think I'd like to ask any other members of the commission if they'd like to address this. And Seth, that's assuming that you don't wish to reply to Mr. Wood, or would you like to reply?
I would like to, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wood. And I'm not going to take any of your comments personally, but I would just
No,
say
please
that,
don't.
you know, this is a regulatory process. This isn't a legal process. I'm not going to make an assessment of what the laws are because I'm not an attorney. But from our regulatory standpoint, resource areas, you know, can be determined at any time. Resource areas change on site as different things happen. And we need to both look at the existing conditions on site today and the history of the site together to decide what exists today. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just would point out too that the Mr. Haynes' clients had the opportunity to appeal to Superior Court under your bylaw, had the opportunity to appeal to DEP. They didn't. It doesn't matter Seth's comment about resource areas change. Of course they do. But if you have a locked-in OOC that's good for 3 years, the resource areas are locked in for 3 years. Unless there's some bad faith mistake or something, the commission, in our view, had the chance to review this process, and if they wanted to make a determination as to what resource areas in addition to land subject to coastal storm flowage there were, the opportunity was in that OOC. There's 2 ways to determine resource areas and lock them in for 3 years, under an ANRAD process, as we obviously know, and under an OOC. And once a property has its resource areas locked in through an OOC, it's good for 3 years. This issue is, I think you should get input from George or whoever, but I can't imagine he'll disagree with me. And so I again suggest this issue is moot.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Chair.
So let me see. Linda, I see your hand raised.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I'm sort of mystified why we're retreading this again. I thought this was settled when we were back on the original thing last year, where we were talking about the rain garden and where the water was and everything else. I thought we already went through this, so I'm just sort of mystified why I'm doing this again. I don't know what we're doing.
Thank you, Linda. Any further observations from commissioners? And seeing none, I assume, RJ, that you would like to weigh in. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Golding. RJ Turcott on behalf of the Nantucket Land and Water Council. We have reason to believe that this site not only is not going to be in compliance with the order of conditions that it already has, the permit that it already has, due to grading issues with the rain garden and that rainwater moving instead towards the back of the property as was intended and designed, but moving towards the front of the property. We also have significant reason to believe that further illegal work has been done on the site to provide subsurface infiltration for the groundwater or for the surface water that is moving away from the rain garden towards the front of the site, towards the gravel driveway. We have reason to believe that that pipe runs from there down to that storm drain, which is why in our letter, we also reference the new surface water and groundwater regulations that the town select board has just adopted as well, because we, as of right now, are of the mind that this is an illegal connection to a storm drain and an illicit discharge from this site, which will not allow it to revert back to the way it was prior, which was the intention of that permit just a couple months ago when it was issued. The intention was to do monitoring and to see if what Mr. Haynes documented in fact is there and will come back. So from a regulatory perspective, I'm not sure with that 3-year permit open, how building a house here will allow you to get a certificate of compliance when those performance standards that were added aren't going to be able to be met because the site is being altered further. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. Art, do you have a response?
So there's no drainage that, according to what the owner has told me or that I've seen, that's been put onto the site that's draining the site. There was just in the front corner, right at the property line, a box that he put in that connects to that pipe, and that could certainly be removed. But there's no other change of drainage. And again, I think that would fall under the, whether that's under the other order. He was putting in the conduits to serve the, for the utilities to serve the site and the road and put that in. But again, I think that, he could take that out, which shouldn't have been put in. But it does not impact the rest of the property.
Thank you. So, Jeff? I guess my inclination would be to act on Mr. Wood's suggestion and ask town council whether or not this issue extends to the regulatory process, as Seth feels it does, so that we can ask for a third-party review of what is taking place. So otherwise, I see we're at loggerheads. Unless, so what would you suggest?
I mean, I think my suggestion, I'm happy to ask council. I'm not sure if it will be George or and maybe Greg or even John to answer that, just to confirm. I will 100% agree that when we issue orders of conditions, we confirm resource area boundaries that we're able to confirm, and that those are binding. I do think at the time, when with the information that was in on the previous filing, right, we just aren't able to, there was nothing to confirm. And I know it's from disturbance. And my recollection of that, again, I wasn't involved in all of the hearings, but I was in the last one, is there was heavy disturbance to the site. No one will disagree with that. The intent of putting something back in the site was to bring back some level of functionality that was there prior onto the site for handling water that was there. From our site inspections that were there, there were also a number of offsite drainage pipes that contributed to the site. There was roadway runoff that contributed to the site. It's obviously a heavily impacted site by the neighborhood. But again, when we went through, I know we found varying soil conditions across the site. Did a number of holes. The vegetation obviously isn't there. But I know at the time, we weren't able to confirm any other resource areas just from the condition of the site. I mean, I hate to say it, and I know I've said this phrase a million times to everybody, and probably even said it to Ian today, is we were dealt kind of a bad hand and tried to make the best out of it at the end, because we were at the same point that we were in the last hearing process, where you need to move forward in a way to address the interests in the bylaw and in the state act. Obviously, I think if we're dealing with any jurisdictional area here, besides land subject to coastal storm flowage, it clearly wouldn't be covered by the state act. It's far too small. The state act requires a 5,000 square foot minimum. It's not big enough. I think in this case, we have a lot of anecdotal evidence and things that were there. We have no filings to go from. We just really lack information before the disturbance to really confirm where things were for sure. And I think the commission went through great steps to try to return something that protected similar interests at the end of the day in the last hearing process. So that all being said, I'm happy to confirm with George or someone else from KP, Mr. Wood's statements that that last OOC is binding, just to get an opinion on that. And if they tend to agree with that, then we'll present that. If they happen to disagree, then we obviously can pursue, additional third-party review. And I guess we'll have to figure out who we're going to have to do that, keeping in mind, right, that we're going to be doing a third-party review even of previous information that was filed and things were included with this. The site evaluation that's going to happen today is not necessarily reflective of that information that was brought in before. So there's going to be some level of reconciliation with that too, but it may be moot with town council's opinion. So I think that sounds like the easiest path.
Mr. Wood?
If I would just like to have the opportunity, and I do think that's the proper path, Mr. Chair. I think we will try to just bang out a quick letter identifying that and just direct it to Jeff that he can pass along. I'd say two things is that, and I think, running off of Linda's comment, two things. One is that, and Jeff's, Art and myself are dealing with what we're dealing with, right? And what a client did. And so we hired our own consultants. David Haynes was involved. The commission struggled with it. We all agree there was some struggle with it, but we think in the end, the way we understand the order of conditions, and as it was drafted with identifying no vegetated wetlands on the site, we propose this rain garden as a way for, some level of good mitigation, which clearly is for the site and also for stormwater that trespasses from other properties onto our site illegally, which was pointed out by your former chair. In fact, in the last hearing, when you voted to approve it, she noted that specifically. And so we propose this. If your order of conditions identified vegetated wetland in the OOC and checked the box, we would have appealed to DEP and sued the commission in Superior Court. You didn't. So to come back and revisit the resource areas that are binding for 3 years where you didn't identify it specifically would be grossly prejudicial to our client at this point. That's, so that's the second point, an extremely important point. Again, pointing out that the neighbors, if they had a problem with it, they should have appealed it. Now, maybe the commission, as issuing the order, missed this nuance, or some people in it did, but that's what the OOC says, and the commission has to live with it legally. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Not at all. And so if you'd be kind enough to send a letter to Jeff and Art, I take it that you would like to continue at this point?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Because I think, Mr. Chair, the point is that if this would otherwise make the lot undevelopable, and if we have lost the appellate opportunity to do that, that's grossly prejudicial. So thanks again.
Thank you. Are you continuing to the 31st, or would you like to continue beyond then?
No, 31st, please.
Okay, thanks, Art. Okay, moving forward, the next one is
Ian, before you, a quick question. Do we need a motion to consult town council?
I don't think so, Mark, but thank you for mentioning it. Do we, Jeff?
No, I'm happy to reach out to them and do our request for legal services.
Okay.
I think with the letter there specific to, I don't think it will take very long.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jeff. So Art, that brings you back for Roland, 3 Port Govett Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in front of you tonight with a notice of intent application for residential redevelopment within land subject, partially within land subject to coastal storm flowage. We've showed all of the proposed work on the site, but I think it's important to point out to the commission that it's really the southern 2/3 of the property, which is jurisdictional, shown in the I guess brown yellow color. His contour 8, which is the limit of land subject to coastal storm flowage. And thank you, the same good color match. And the proposal is to pick up an existing single family dwelling and put it on a new foundation, raise it to be compliant with building codes within the flood zone, and move it out of the zoning setback. As you can see, it's right up against the property line, and there'd be a slight configuration of the proposed parking area, and a couple of new walkways. No changes of grade are proposed, so we believe that all performance standards are met, and again, actually ultimately an improvement to the site conditions with respect to the abilities of the floodwaters to pass and repass through the site. I'd be happy to take questions or concerns should you have any, and there's no vegetated wetlands.
Thanks, Art. Any questions from commissioners? Seeing none, any questions from members of the public? So Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion? Mark, was that a motion?
Yes.
Whatever you want, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
Thank you for the guidance, Ian. I
Second,
move to
Mr.
close the
Chairman.
hearing.
all
Second,
right,
Mr. Chairman.
all right. So seconded by Linda. So on that note, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
So next up is 63 Halbert Avenue LLC, 63 Halbert Avenue. And Mark Ritz is in.
Good evening, Mark Ritz from Site Design Engineering, joined by Arthur Reed, representing the applicants at 63 Halbert Avenue. It's actually 63 and 63A. It's two parcels, but they are in common ownership and treated as one property. The project before you this evening is a request to take two small buildings, an existing cottage and an existing dwelling, elevate them outside of above the floodplain. The only resource area on this portion of the property is land subject to coastal storm flowage. The buildings will be elevated above the 100-year flood, placed on a pier foundation to allow for water to flow underneath the buildings in the event of flooding. And the buildings will be slightly reconfigured and will have small decks and additional steps added to allow for access to the elevated structures. That is both proposed structures are more or less within the same footprint as existing structures, which are now at grade and on slab or block foundation. So we're going to improve the water flow beneath the structures in the event of flooding without really significantly changing the footprint or the impacts to the property. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Any questions from members of the public? Would you like to close, Mark?
Please.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
Do I hear a motion to close? Joe, do I hear a second? Tim,
Second.
thank you. Seconded by Tim Brain. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, which brings us
Thank you.
on to, you're welcome. And I believe you're up again for 4 Sophie's Way LLC, 21 Pilgrim Road and 4 Sophie's Way.
Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design Engineering, representing the applicants at 4 Sophies and 21 Pilgrim. The project you have before you tonight is a residential development of this property, which is currently almost entirely a lawn and has been for quite some time. There are 2 wetland resource areas, both are off-site. One is to the east, and it casts a buffer onto the eastern portion of the property. The northeast corner of the property is approximately 70 or so feet from the wetland, so it's well outside of the 50. The other wetland is on the opposite side of Pilgrim Road, which is at this point an unpaved public way. And that wetland also casts a buffer onto the property, and the 50-foot buffer is just west of our property. What the applicant is proposing is to construct a pool and spa, I'm sorry, a pool and a small, my apologies, pool and a small patio on the northeast corner of the property. A portion of the pool and the patio will be in the 100-foot, but outside of the 50. And the applicant is also proposing to construct in jurisdictional areas a pergola on the western side of the property, and a small sliver of the garage is going to be just inside the 100-foot buffer. The pergola and the proposed small pervious driveway will be just inside the 100-foot buffer. The rest of the property will be, landscaped and maintained more or less as lawn as it is now. And the only 2 jurisdictional activities are the portion of the pool, patio, and the pergola. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Any questions from members of the public?
Yes, Peter Halley. I submitted a written series of issues, and I live across the street from the property. We're very happy that it's being developed the way it is, and we have a concern nonetheless that we hope will be addressed. I don't know whether it's in your jurisdiction or somebody else's jurisdiction, but the issue is surface waters, and surface waters from this property going on to Pilgrim Road and into the wetland across the street from Pilgrim Road, which in part happens to be on my property. This is the latest, I guess, owner of this property. It having been, I think, subdivided maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And there have been promises all along to solve the stormwater problem, and that has not happened. And so this project will apparently exacerbate the stormwater problem, because you're going from an area that is entirely permeable to about 20 to 25% impermeable, and it's not clear whether the zoning requirement that all stormwaters be recharged onto the property is going to be satisfied when it is built. And so we were asking, again, if it's in your purview, that there be a condition that all of this project be built so that there is recharge of the waters onto the property itself and not across the road. So I don't think it's a unique situation in Nantucket, but what you have is on one side of the road, an R1 area, which is where this project is going to take place, and the other side is an R20. And with the different density regulations, you've got sort of an R20 type road that is separating R1 properties with much higher density and therefore much higher propensity to expel surface waters onto the road. The last point being that in the, I think within the 100-foot boundary, there is a proposed structure, and that is a retaining wall, which will raise the elevation approximately 5 feet in that area. And this is on the east side of the property, and therefore pitch it even more toward the west side of the property in Pilgrim Road than it was before. We don't know what the solution is there. Again, if there can be a recharge system that in today's world, not based on aged calculations of surface water issues, but in today's world, which seems to be a much wetter world than we have been in before, we don't have any problems so long as that is complied with. Thank you.
So, yes, Mark, if you'd like to reply.
Just to quickly address that, if some of those issues, if I may, the vast majority of the impervious structures on the property are outside of the 100-foot wetlands buffer. However, the applicant is planning to construct all 3 buildings with roof drains with infiltration on them. So that a portion of the property will be recharged. The area upland of the proposed retaining wall will be landscaped, with the exception of the portion of the pool and the patio, and the driveway on the west side will be pervious. So the impervious structures will all have roof drains with infiltrators.
Thank you, Mark. Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had initially been looking at that retaining wall as well, but if you look at the elevation at the northeast corner of the lot, you're all the way down at 17, and then you get up to like around elevation 20, where the proposed center dwelling is. So if anything, the water would actually be draining towards the northeast rather than towards Pilgrim Road. It would be draining away from Pilgrim Road based on the elevation.
Thank you, Seth. So I'm sorry, is it Peter Halle or Peter Hall?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say that I see that line, and as I understand the drawing that we've been furnished, to the east of that 17 line is where this retaining wall, proposed retaining wall goes, that has an elevation at the top of 21 feet. And I don't know if that's showing on yours or if I'm misreading the drawing that was filed with the notice of intent. But right there in that sort of northeast corner, there is something called, let's see, where is it? There is, I think, a proposed retaining wall. Yeah, it says.
So, as Mr. Ritz pointed out, basically both ends of the lot are outside our jurisdiction, and it sounds from what he said that the owners are doing their best to make sure that all the water is infiltrated. So I'm not sure what else they could do. Are you not satisfied with the precautions they're taking. And Jeff, do you want to weigh in before I put my foot firmly in my mouth on this subject?
You're doing a great job of not putting your foot in your mouth of explaining it, but I think really we have a kind of an interesting situation here where, obviously within our jurisdiction is the retaining wall, and then the pool and patio, or at least a portion of the pool and patio on that end, and then the pergola on the other end. And I will never say unfortunately. Fortunately, the rest of the development is entirely out of our buffer zone. So that's great from a pure wetland perspective that, I would say a solid 3/4 or more of this development is outside of our jurisdiction. I think the issue when we're looking at runoff across, Pilgrim Road and Sophie's Way and into there a little bit, unfortunately is probably a matter that's better addressed through planning and zoning than it is through our jurisdiction, since the project that's here is fairly limited. When we look at that west side of the property, we could put all kinds of conditions that we wanted onto the pergola structure that was there, but that's all we really have over there, outside of the pre-existing lawn. And the other side, obviously, there's the development that's a little bit more. I wish there was more we could do to help address it, but I really think that, zoning is probably the best avenue to talk to about making sure that the development isn't putting additional water into the traveled way that's there. That's just kind of my take on the whole thing.
Thank you. That'll be our next stop.
Thank you, Jeff. And
But those are definitely valid concerns to bring up. And it's always better to bring them up and get pointed to somewhere else than not say it at all. So.
right. So there we have it. Mark, do you wish to close?
Please.
Jeff? Do we have everything we need to close?
All the required information is in.
Do I hear a motion to close? Joe? And Mark? Oh. Okay, I think Mark. Tim, I'm afraid, I think Mark was the second in that particular instance. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Klandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Hi.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, everybody. So that moves us on to CMR 11 Osprey LLC, 11 Osprey Way. And
I have to
Mark?
recuse from this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. Mark?
Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design Engineering, representing the applicants at 11 Osprey Way. I just won't leave you guys alone tonight. I've got another one after this. The project before you is a redevelopment of the existing developed property. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the pale blue dashed line on the upper part of the plan. That is the 100-foot buffer from wetland buffer. There's currently a portion of the existing house, which is shown in pale gray on the plan, straddles that 100-foot buffer, and the proposed dwelling in with the heavier black line with the hatching is basically proposed on top of the existing dwelling with a bit of a reconfiguration and a bit of addition on the deck on the wetland side. All structures will be greater than about 70 feet from the wetland. All structures will be the main house dwelling here will be flood zone compliant to get it up above flood elevation and to allow stormwater flow underneath. The majority of the rest of the development on the property is well outside of the 100-foot buffer. The septic system shown on the plan is previously installed and well outside of the 100-foot buffer. So we're really dealing, for the majority of the work is rebuilding rebuilding a new house on top of where the existing house footprint is with a slight expansion. With that, I'll be happy to address any questions or concerns.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions from members of the public? Jeff?
Yes, I mentioned this to Mark earlier, so this won't come as a huge surprise to him. We had a couple things we picked up on our site inspection that was there. It's super hard to see on the plan, but on the western side of the property, there is a hedge that was installed inside the 100-foot buffer zone prior to the permit. I know we've been trying to call that out to make sure that that's there. I mean, it technically would be permissible. The one thing that I was going to throw out to the commission is the hedge that was installed is a Leland cypress of some kind. I know there's a million. It looks to me like it's the green giant variety. It's my guess. That's within the 100-foot buffer zone. I had kind of suggested to Mark that I would probably be suggesting that that get converted to a native species in that area. And then the only other thing, should not have taken a sip of seltzer right before I started talking. Closer to where the marsh comes in on the pond, there had historically been a smaller path was there. It looks like at some point in the last little bit, a little bit extra had gotten mowed. I was just going to recommend that the commission call out in any order. And I throw it out for discussion here, so that way we're not just doing it there and Mark can comment on it. Maybe suggest that path be maintained at a certain width, and then anything beyond there just be allowed to kind of renaturalize through there. Kind of looking back at old aerials, it looked like that path has kind of varied a little bit from anywhere from like 4 to 6 feet over time and kind of different configurations. So I don't think it really makes a difference if we just call out the width, but other than that, the site was seemingly fine. And my guess is the cypress that was installed looks like it was for privacy purposes. And I can 100%, given the closeness of the neighbor, see how it got installed, and no one thought of the 100-foot buffer zone. So it's not like it's some crazy egregious violation, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of it since I put it in the report.
Thank you, Jeff. And Mark?
We would be happy to address both of those issues. Jeff did mention them to me previously. In terms of the path, we would be happy to maintain it, let's say nominally 4 to 5 feet wide, and let the area that was previously native vegetation regrow. We can flag that out for the landscapers out in the field to let them have that previous area. It's visible on some older aerials, so we can get that staked out and let that area revegetate. And in terms of the Leland cypress, we would be happy to replace those with a native species. Everything that was planted is I believe well outside of the 25-foot buffer, and we'd be happy to replace those with some native species to provide a bit of screening on that side.
And are you proposing that you plant them from the 50 towards the building, or do you want to plant them within the 25 to 50 as well?
I believe they were planted almost exclusively from the 50 to the building currently, and we would just replace that portion from the 50 back.
So from my rough guesstimation, and I don't want to get called out in the newspaper for measuring with a ladder or anything again. From my rough guesstimation, it looked to me like it was probably the closest one was probably no closer than like 60 feet to the resource area. So we're even outside of the 50. Again, I hesitated to bring it up other than the fact that it was pretty clear that they were, I would say, installed probably in the spring of this year, would be my guess.
Right. So yeah, we would be keeping the new ones, consistent with what was planned. We just replace what was there. So would be greater than 50. So nothing inside, no new disturbance inside the 50.
Great, thank you, Mark. And unless there are any further comments, would you like to close?
Please.
And Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
Great. Do I hear a motion to close? Seth, do I see a second? Tim, thank you. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams. Linda?
Recused.
Sorry, my mistake. Ian Golding, aye. So,
Thank you.
and then Mark, so you're right. You're up again for the Nantucket Lot 51 LLC 143 Eel Point Road.
Once again, Mark. Ritz from
Mr.
Site
Chair.
Design.
Yes?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, third time's a charm. I'll be recused from this one as well.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll try and remember it in correct order this time.
Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design Engineering, representing the applicants at 143 Eel Point Road. What you have here is a project that had been previously approved a number of years ago and was never constructed. This property, this particular area, is part of a coastal dune field. In fact, it is the property for which that definition was specifically enacted in your bylaw. The extent of the landward extent of the coastal dune field is shown by the green line on the plan, and that was determined through an extensive coring study that was done on the site many years ago. We collected a large number of core samples, and everybody at the time was pretty happy that was as far landward as the dune field went. That said, the proposed structure is outside of the 50-foot buffer to that dune field, the proposed dwelling. Portions of it are inside the 100, but nothing crosses the 50 except a portion of our proposed silt fence to give us some room to work. Septic, driveway, parking will all be landward of the 100-foot buffer. Because we have a rather extensive dune field seaward of the proposed structure, the applicant would like to construct an elevated boardwalk for beach access on this property. The boardwalk will be elevated approximately 18 inches above grade to remove the need for any railings except possibly at the stairs going down to the beach. And the 18-inch elevation will allow for some light penetration underneath and for vegetation to be able to grow under the proposed boardwalk. It's going to be just a couple feet wide, just kind of minimal width to allow for safe pedestrian access. Keep people from traipsing through the dunes, disturbing native vegetation, as is suggested under the bylaw and state requirements for travel through a dune. And that's pretty much the extent of this. The previous approval had a boardwalk that was about 40% longer than this. The lot lines had been a little bit different, and it extended to the east quite a bit before going north. We've shortened it to kind of a straight shot to keep the length minimum. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? So refresh my memory, Mark, how wide is do you want the boardwalk to be?
I think we'd like to have it about 4 feet, just to allow one or two people to walk safely on it, but no wider than that.
Okay. And so from my perspective, I would want you to come in with an actual design if you were decided that you would need railings down towards the beach. So are you happy with us conditioning it that no railings unless you want to come in for a minor mod with drawings?
Certainly.
Great, thank you. Mark.
I'm a little unsure on the benefits of having a boardwalk versus walking through an established path in the dunes. Is that established scientific technology that it's better to walk on to cover up the vegetation and the dunes with a wooden walkway versus just you see a ton of paths going through beach grass going to a beach. Doesn't mean they're walking all over the dunes, but people tend to stay in the path. And I want to make sure that this is the right thing to do for the 100-foot barrier.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Ritz.
Well, under your own bylaw requirements, it says that access through a dune should be via an elevated boardwalk.
Yeah, I know that. I guess all right. I just
Well, sadly, Mark, it seems that the way it's going, right? And as Mr. Ritz said, unless we have a cooperative, an old school owner, it seems our hands are tied. And up, I see Arthur Reed is going to wrap my knuckles.
Yeah,
no doubt. Yes, Arthur.
No, I think this is all well taken, but specifically, I think that the point on having the access through the dune be on a boardwalk rather than on paths on the ground is the paths on the ground over a period of time tend to migrate, and you wind up with more access over a larger area as things change on the ground than with the boardwalk, which funnels the activity into one specific location that doesn't move and change. And I think that that's the reason why it's generally considered that it's better to have the access be over a boardwalk rather than through paths that are inherently imprecise and tend to wander.
Thank you, Arthur. And Jeff, do I see your hand raised?
So I'll lower my hand. So when that performance standard was originally put in, sadly, I was here for a lot of that discussion and remember talking about it quite a bit. And not only do you see the paths migrate, and this is a little editorial for me too, the other thing that you tend to see with consistent use on those dune paths that are tried by foot is they lower over time, right? As you, between compaction and people going through, is those paths tend to gully in. And I think you can see this, like one of the really evident ones that you can see it if you go to like Washington Pond Beach and go over that path, over that dune system that's there. That path is lowered over time just from use and wind scour because there's no vegetation on it and it tends to channel through there. The boardwalks tend to at least maintain better vegetation in and around. I think that was the original kind of thought that goes with those. And really quickly, as an aside, before you ask me, to be the total killjoy to this, Mark can probably provide a plan because we haven't had our determination from Natural Heritage back yet. So we should still have some time. Unless he's going to remind me that the other one's still valid.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, this project, the original approval for this was done as part of a overall large development plan for this lot and what were at the time several abutting lots to the east. And all of that was submitted for Heritage for basically for an overall site approval and a subdivision approval. And portions of that subdivision have started and have been constructed on the eastern portion of the work. And typically Heritage treats that as basically the rest of the subdivision is still valid and can be developed as previously proposed. So we've sent them a courtesy copy of this just to update their files, but this has been the case on a number of other subdivision scenarios on Island.
No, that is true. Sorry, I misread that in the application, so you guys can continue talking and I'll confirm that really quickly.
So, so picking up on Mark Beal's comment about the path, I don't think I've ever seen a 4-foot wide sand path through the dunes. I mean, they tend to be rather narrow because, of course, people do go in behind each other. Is there speaking to Mark Ritz, is there would you ask your client if they could reduce it to 3 foot in width, rather than 4?
We can step it down to 3 foot if that will make the commissioners happier.
Well, thank you. I think I think that would be a help under the circumstances. And so, Jeff, shall we? So I assume you'd like to close, Mr. Ritz.
I would if we're satisfied that we have all the necessary information.
Well, that's why I was going to then ask Jeff whether you would want us to wait for 2 weeks or.
Thanks to the power of the interweb, I was able to confirm what Mark was talking about. So we're on.
Great. So would a commissioner propose a motion to close, please?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
He's recused.
Oh God, really?
He's in
I
the bottom.
even made a note to that effect, which I've just ignored. I apologize to my fellow commissioners. Joe Clandusky.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So
Thank you.
thank you, Mark. So
It's one of those nights, lack of sun for 10 days.
So that moves us on to Meadowview Pond Trust, 54 and 56 Meadowview Drive. Jeff Blackwell.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Jeff Blackwell for the applicants. This is a project where there is a property that's currently developed with 2 single-family dwellings. And the dwellings are connected to town water and sewer. And the proposal is to add additional structure. Well, the existing structures are beyond the 50-foot setback to the bordering vegetated wetland, and all additional work is proposed to also comply with the 50-foot setback. There is a proposed tertiary dwelling between the 2 existing structures, and that is well beyond the 50-foot setback. It approaches about 70 feet in distance from the wetland. And then a shed is proposed in the northwest corner, also more than 50 feet from the bordering vegetated wetland. So this is not a waiver project. It's a project that complies with your rules and regulations. And I will answer any questions that the commission members have.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? Hearing none. Seeing none. Any members of the public who wish to comment? So, Jeff, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Jeff Carlson, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do. And really quick fun fact on this lot, this lot originally contained the first ever phosphorus removal system for a septic system on Nantucket.
Wow.
Since gone, but back in the olden days, had a phosphorus system.
Thank you for the historical note. The historical
I don't
addendum.
remember that, but I do.
So, a motion to close. Thank you, Joe. Seconded by Mark. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Aye.
Joe Plandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding. Aye. So
Thank you very much.
thank you, Jeff. Take care. So
Sure.
that brings us on to amended orders of conditions. Doherty ACK LLC, 2 Mariner Way. Oh, sorry, that's been continued. I beg your pardon. So no amended orders of conditions. Request for determination of applicability. Nantucket Boat Basin LLC, 17 Commercial Wharf. So Catherine Barnacle.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Katie Barnacle from Ilex Environmental, representing Nantucket Boat Basin LLC, care of New England Development tonight. And you actually have 3 things on your docket tonight, which are all related to this project. And the first is a request for determination. And this project is, we would like to swap the building, the Rowland House building at 15 Commercial Street, which is owned by Nantucket Island Land Bank, move it across 17 Commercial Wharf, which is the subject of this RDA, over to where the Meridian Cottage exists at Commercial Wharf. So there's 3 lots that are involved. We already have orders of conditions for like 90% of the work on the 15 Commercial Street property where the Meridian Cottage is. We already have Nantucket Island Land Bank, Nantucket Island's Land Bank already has an order of conditions to remove the building from 15 Commercial Wharf. But we would like to take their building, which is a beautiful, fairly new building, about 14 years old, and replace it with the 1970s building that we have at Meridian, which is not in great shape. So this opportunity came out because of the Petrel Landing open space project that Nantucket Island's Land Bank has on 15 Commercial Wharf and 17 Commercial Wharf. And so what's in front of you right now is we filed a request for determination of applicability in order to move, the Rowland House from point A to point B. We have to cross over 17 Commercial Wharf where there's no building. There's rocks we need to move. There's some grass that might be disturbed. It's all in floodplain. It's in the buffer zone to a coastal bank that's on the property. It's also in the buffer zone to land under the ocean, land subject to tidal action. The work will take maybe a week, 2 weeks at most to move from point A to point B. What's also in front of you and actually comes right up after this RDA is a request for minor modification for putting the Rowland House building onto where Meridian Cottage is right now. And so there's a lot of moving parts, but I tried to hopefully keep this simple because we already have approvals for the 15 Commercial Street Wharf work and the Meridian work, but we need to cover this 17 Commercial Wharf work. And so we just need to move the building across this property. And so we filed a request for determination of applicability for that work. And we'd like to, sorry about my dog, we'd like to request a negative determination that yes, the work is within the floodplain, within your jurisdiction, but that the work will not alter that resource area or any of the buffer zones. Sorry, I'm here.
Great, thank
My
you.
apologies. I've trained her to bark during public hearings.
Well, better than training her to bite, I would say. So, Jeff? Oh,
Do you guys have any
sorry, Seth.
questions before I talk?
Yes, Seth, I apologize for not recognizing you.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I certainly understand from a practical perspective the approach being taken here, but procedurally I am a little bit concerned about using the RDA process and the minor mod and the extension process rather than just doing a notice of intent to encompass all of these activities in one. This specifically because we severely lack the ability to condition projects under the RDA process as compared to in the notice of intent process through the order of conditions. So although it seems like a simple project, I can imagine that there are potential impacts of moving that structure that could cause erosion, sedimentation, runoff into those buffer zones. And I'd like to have the ability as a commission to protect those interests with conditions that require or aid in the protection of those interests. So I don't know, Jeff, if you think we have the suitable ability to do that through the RDA, or if not, I would actually move that we should go through to the notice of intent. I get what is being tried to be done here, but I don't want to allow simplicity to go forward at the sake of, not protecting the resource areas in the best way that we can. Thank you.
So if I may jump in before, I see, Linda, you have your hand raised, and Jeff, I know the question was directed to you, but do you see any adverse consequences on this particular application, Seth, or is it more a question of principle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are certainly the possibility for adverse consequences. You're removing an older structure, picking up a newer structure, and using heavy machinery. There's certainly the ability to create erosion and sedimentation, mostly, which do cause impacts to those buffer zones, to those resource areas that Ms. Barnacle represented. And I want the ability to condition the project to minimize erosion and sedimentation so that we don't have any of those potential impacts. If we can do that through the RDA, great, but I know we're limited in what we can put on RDAs. Thank you.
Thank you. And Linda, do you have anything to add before Jeff answers Seth's question?
Yeah, Jeff, this may be part of what Jeff may have to answer. On the previous orders that dealt with Mickey Rowland's lot and Meridian, weren't all those issues dealt with I wasn't here, I don't believe, when the originals were done. I may have been here for one of them, but weren't those things that Seth is concerned about dealt with in the previous orders that don't have anything to do with lots 17 commercial? I can respond to that if that helps.
Certainly, Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, the Rowland House building, it was for the removal of the structure from that lot and site restoration. So it envisioned all that work on that property. On the Meridian, we envisioned having to take the building off site, removing it off site. We need to fix the seawall, which is part of the commercial wharf order that's still active, and put in new pilings, concrete pilings for that property, and then put the building back. The only thing that we're asking for when we get to that minor mod is putting a new building back instead of the old building back. So both those properties envisioned all of the impacts, the erosion control, the construction phasing, all that work that would be done. We just have to get from point A to point B. And so we need to get across that one lot. Luckily, we're very close. You know, we're very fortunate that this is only one lot away, and we can take advantage of not having to destroy this beautiful 14-year-old building. You know, we have to take down the Meridian, but it's a 1970s cottage that is a little worse for wear right now. The more we looked at it, the more we realized how it was in really poor condition. And we have this beautiful building that we can just pop over. So that's why we thought, all right, you know, this is kind of right in between. We could do it with the RDA, and the commission does still have control over those two active and alive order of conditions. You know, so there's still plenty of enforcement, and, you know, this is Nantucket Boat Basin and Nantucket Island Land Bank. And, you know, we try to do the best that we can. Nantucket Boat Basin, I'm speaking for. I don't want to, you know, say something representing the Nantucket Islands Land Bank, but, you know, we want to do this fall. It's going to take a week. It may not even take a week. They think it'll take like 1 or 2 days to actually get there. But we thought, you know, putting a week, maybe 2, just for contingencies that we have. We thought that this would be a good solution. But I certainly understand what Seth's talking about. But I think there's a lot of, you know, already 2 pretty strong orders of conditions that are alive that will give the commission enforcement capabilities if something goes awry. So I'm comfortable with the RDA.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Linda. And Tim, you would like to chime in?
I was just curious, what method of transport are you going to use across the property? Is it like I-beam tracks, or what's the plan?
Yeah, and they call them trolleys or dollies. And I'm sorry, I'm not a construction person, but it is putting those structures so that it can be slid across. And we will have to move, I think there's some boulders on that 17 Commercial Wharf property to prevent people from driving in certain areas. We're going to have to move some of that material in order to put those structures there, but those will be replaced. And then obviously the Nantucket Island Land Bank has the Petrol Landing open space project, because this is all to support their open space project. Right. You know, that Roland House building is going away, and that's going to be more open space there. So you know, it's a pretty decent project. I hope that answers. I'm not a construction person, but
I'm mainly just curious. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Seth, has Kathy addressed your concerns, or would you like to press Jeff on the subject?
I'd still like to hear what Jeff has to say, or maybe we can pull up those existing order of conditions to see what they say. That might assuage my concerns. If those conditions are already in there, then it's covered.
Jeff?
I have the condition, or what was in the notice of intent for the Meridian Cottage, and I also have the notice of intent up on my screen for the Roland House. So would you like me to read what we put in our notice of intent? Would that help?
I'm not sure if the reference numbers would help you bring them up on the screen so everybody can see them.
Yes, I am just. So we have the boat basin one. It'll take a second on the land bank one. So
Do you
this
have the
one
number,
here-
Jeff, on that one?
Yeah, what's the number on the land bank filing?
It's 3399.
3399. Oh, that's convenient. 3399. All right, so keeping in mind, right, so when we issue out an order of conditions, real quickly, just to run through it, there are certain standard conditions that are always included in there. Installation of siltation barriers, both under the state OOC and our extra local conditions, require that siltation barriers be in place to prevent loose sediments from leaving the site improperly. So it may not call it out specifically in the findings page, but it is included in the general order of conditions. I can dig that up too if people want to see it. So here's the order for the commercial wharf piece for the Meridian College. I said. not
Cottage.
Meridian Cottage. So, so hopefully you guys can see that here. We kind of focused a little bit more on the bulkhead that was going through there, but we did call out the demolition, relocation, and reconstruction of buildings on the site. I remember we talked about it at great length when we had this discussion. That's there. And then the land bank order, just to switch it up, is a little bit less.
Mhm.
Where? So many screens to share. You can see this one was really more focused on the rehabilitation of that site, with it vacating on that plan. I mean, they obviously had siltation barriers around where the structure was going to be vacating for them to revegetate that site, and included in their actual Petrol Landing permit. There is a permit for work on Petrol Landing too, and its rehabilitation itself. But I know that has been tied up in litigation for quite some time. So that one's a little bit funky.
And if, may I add some more information that may help?
Sure.
The phasing is that we take down Meridian Cottage. That gets moved off site, that material. Then we have to redo the seawall in front of that building, which is part of the commercial wharf bulkhead reconstruction project. That's already permitted. You know, we have Army Corps Chapter 91, the order of conditions for that. That's going to have, you know, the silt booms. That's going to have some pretty serious erosion control because we're working on the face of that seawall at that building. And the easiest way to do that is get the building out of there in order to repair from behind, because there's like this a sinkhole. You know, a lot of the sediment has been settling through that seawall. So that gets done. And then we put in the concrete pilings for where we thought the Meridian building would come back. So those pilings get placed on there. So then when that's done, and then the work gets done at the Rowland House to kind of decommission it over there, you know, whatever work needs to be done to get that ready to move. And then we move it from point A to point B. So where most of the work is happening, you know, we have erosion control. We have a ton of erosion control happening over at Meridian Cottage, you know, because of the work on the seawall, and that can remain in its entirety until this whole project is completed. So we were just trying to fill in that blank, that, you know, that one middle lot. We thought an RDA was appropriate, but, you know, I certainly understand the commission's concerns. We just thought because we have these two orders of conditions that, and the work actually on the 17 commercial wharf is gonna, you know, be a very small period of time compared to the work on the others. You know, those will take more weeks. This will just take a week, maybe even, you know, 2 days to get the building from one to the other, one place to the other. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Catherine. Linda, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just it might make it a little easier to understand the logistics because I was down there. Meridian is sitting smack on the dirt. The Mickey Rowland's building, because it was built much later, 30, 40 years later, is lifted up out of the ground. So it's easier to just slide it over. Meridian has to go away completely. Yeah. But it's my understanding that the actual impact on the wharf, once Mickey Rowland's is moved over there, is that footprint is actually less than the footprint of Meridian. So it looks like to be a win-win here. Yeah, it's 75 square feet less, and all decks will be cantilevered, you know, because I think over at the Rowland House, they're not cantilevered, but we're going to match what the Meridian has now, which is cantilevered. So we're going to make it so that they're equal buildings, but smaller footprint, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Catherine. So Seth, after reading the orders of conditions, are you mollified in this situation, or are your concerns outweighing the presentation?
I think moving forward with the RDA at this point is fine. But when we get to the minor mod for the next thing, I might have some additional comments.
Okay, thank you. So, Jeff, what do you opine?
Well, I'll just be really brief. I think when we reviewed it, that given the fact that it's literally the house moving across a lot and probably a couple rocks being taken out, I think our review of it was that it fit within a -2 for work within an area subject to jurisdiction, not requiring a notice of intent.
And
Thank you.
we certainly wouldn't be adverse to you putting conditions on and us filing this at the Registry of Deeds. And that we have some kind of monitoring, Paul Santos has been involved in this project. We could have some monitoring, whatever we can do to, I don't know, to make this work, I guess. I don't know if you do that with RDAs, but we could certainly, I know some commissions sometimes will do that.
There is an ability to put conditions onto RDAs. You can do it. We do it from time to time, depending on projects. Again, I think in this case where you have an order of conditions on the actual removal of the house and then the setting back down of the house, I tend to agree with that. We can talk about the other one a little bit more in a second. This is the piece, and in full disclosure, I think I read this RDA like 6 times before I finally was just like, there's nothing staying here in the end, right? Like in theory, if you went down and took a picture of that site today, this house will move across it, and you can take a picture of the site after it's happened, and you shouldn't notice any difference because it's just transiting across. I kept looking for something more permanent or something happen.
No.
In full disclosure, I'm almost more amazed that they had filed for an RDA and didn't just move across the lot as the house moved. So I super appreciate that they took the extra step to do that, because I'm not sure that in all cases that would have happened. So I think we feel comfortable with that -2. And then we can certainly talk about the next part in the minor mod.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So do I hear a motion to approve the request for determination of applicability as a -2?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Kim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye, which brings us on to minor mods.
Thank you.
And Nantucket Boat Basin LLC, 29 Commercial Wharf. So Kathy, you're in the firing line again.
Great. It's nice that these were back to back, so I appreciate that. Katie Barnacle with Ilex Environmental, representing Nantucket Boat Basin LLC, care of New England Development. And this is for the commercial wharf order of conditions, which is the bulkhead work, which envisioned the Meridian College, Jeff, you got me saying Meridian College, the Meridian Cottage to be removed off-site temporarily, the seawall reconstructed, the concrete pilings in place, and then move the Meridian Cottage back to the site. So we requested a minor mod on this because instead of putting back the Meridian Cottage, we'll be putting back a new building. And so we felt, going back of all the different, filings and submittals we could do, we thought we'll do the request for determination for that middle lot that we just talked about, and then do a request for minor mod for this, because we thought everything's envisioned, everything's included in that order of conditions, except instead of putting the Meridian Cottage back, we're putting a different building back with a 75 square foot less footprint. And so that's why we're requesting a minor mod for this commercial wharf order of conditions, which is basically for the entire bulkhead to be rebuilt, which that part has all been mostly completed. It's just the seawall part that has not been completed, waiting for this to happen, waiting for this permitting to be clarified. So we request a issuance of a minor mod.
Thank you, Katie, and I apologize for calling you Kathy a few minutes ago. So, Seth, did you want to comment on this?
Yes, briefly. And so I appreciate that the structure that's moving onto the site is going to be smaller in footprint, but I don't know if there'll be, impacts on the site. I guess the structure is right next door, but typically with these types of projects, if this was to be a new construction, we would, condition the lighting and put other conditions into place that would reduce those impacts on the land under the ocean and coastal bank buffer zones. So I don't know if we can do that here or not, or we're just accepting that, it's basically a historic use that's moving one property over and everyone's okay with that. So thank you.
Thank you. So Jeff, I think Seth brings up, well, Jeff, yes, please.
So I take Seth's point, and I don't want to sound argumentative, so I'm not, but I think this is really interesting that this project is coming right on the heels of the project that we just did an amended order for out on Crow's Nest Way, where they had originally permitted the move off of the structure, a new foundation, and the move back. And that had been permitted. And in that discussion, we talked about if that would have just changed configuration, it was going to be a minor mod for the new work. But then because they were rebuilding it, we did it through an amended order of conditions. And this is one where we're moving off a structure, moving off an already constructed, moving back an already constructed structure, and putting it in where the old one used to be. I know they're not apples to apples, but I also don't want to contradict what we said, where moving off the structure and moving it back in place was in that grouping, where reconstructing it was an amended order. I know that's a really roundabout way to get to that question. I'm just trying to make sure we're not being inconsistent. I may be way overthinking this too, so I will fully fix up that may be the case.
Well, we would always rather you overthought it than underthought it, Jeff. So, Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe we're both way overthinking it, but my thoughts are the same. It's a new structure, there's new impacts. And there's certainly a possibility that the impacts are less or more or the same, but I think that if, the minor modification process is really meant for like very slight changes in building footprint, or someone doesn't know what the architecturals are going to look like, and they draw a box and then later they get us a modification for a actual architecturally built structure. But I don't see, in my personal opinion, how a completely different structure fits the minor modification process. And maybe that's just me. And I did bring this up at the Crow's Nest way that Jeff is talking about as well. And we do have to tie it back to, obviously protected interests. But I do think there's the ability for different structures in different configurations to have different impacts on the resource areas. And this is where I prefer to see these types of things go through the amended order of conditions request. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Seth. And in this particular case, I tend to agree with you, but I get the feeling Linda is going to disagree. Linda?
You
Without
know me
putting
too
words
well.
into your mouth.
No, that was the right word.
Yeah.
I disagree because I thought that all of this was handled about the impact of moving Mickey Rowland's building, regardless of the 17, the wharf there. I thought all of this was dealt with the last time when it was agreed to move Mickey Rowland's building over to Meridian in the first place. I don't know why we're retreading it again. And I think you can do it under minor mod because it wasn't already approved to go over there with all the caveats and conditions.
Thank you, Linda. And Seth, before we ask Jeff to put that up on the screen, the orders of
Thank
condition.
you. And I might defer to Ms. Barnacle here, but in my understanding, how we handled the RDA is the RDA is really covering only the physical act of moving the structure from one site to the other. It's that sort of temporary process. It's not meant to consider the long-term permanent effects of that building being on the site. That's handled by the order of conditions for this lot. And I understand the place you're coming from where you think the minor mod is suitable, but in my personal opinion, I think that the different structure causes different impacts and elevates it to the AOC.
And if I could just really quickly respond to that, is in the whole picture of this project, we're losing one building that's in the floodplain. One building is going away. We're going from 2 buildings to 1 building. And then where the building is being taken away, the Rowland House, that's going to be open space. So this is such a positive project. You know, we're taking away 1 building in the floodplain. So the whole footprint of one of these buildings won't be there anymore. So the impact is being greatly reduced for work actually in land subject to coastal storm flowage. So when you look at the whole thing, and granted, there are 3 lots and 2 owners. That's why we had to do different actions on different lots, you know, because they're already existing permits. So this is what we thought fit really nicely into the whole project. That what a positive project this is, to take a building that's a 1970s building that would have to be completely reconstructed, probably, if you wanted to save it. And we have this beautiful, 14-year-old building, and all we need to do is move it over. I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying it because there's, construction work and the moving it from point A to point B, but we are eliminating one entire building from land subject to coastal storm flowage. So overall, the impacts are incredibly reduced. And in exchange, Nantucket Island Land Bank will finally be able to move ahead and finish their open space project. And we're helping them do that. They can get rid of that building. They're going to have to destroy it. And I'd hate to have, this very well-built building destroyed. And then we could rebuild the Meridian. This gives that opportunity. We may lose that opportunity if we can't, figure out how to do this. And I just think the overall impact is greatly reduced. And so even though we have 3 different lots with 3 different permits and a little bit here and there, in the big picture, the impacts are greatly reduced. And we think that's why the minor mod works here. That for the commercial wharf, we already have 95% of that approved. It's just putting a different building that already exists over.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Get off my soapbox.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that aspect. It's more questions of whether under an amended order of conditions that it can be conditioned in a way that it can't be in a minor mod. I mean, so Jeff, any thoughts?
Excuse me. And again, I hear what everyone's saying. I think when it came in and I was doing my review on this, if someone brought in an architectural plan and said we were going to reconstruct a 789 square foot structure on a site that we were going to remove a structure from and rebuild it and got a permit from that, if they came back with a new set of architecturals from the HDC and said, we're going to be reducing from 789 to 714. We've approved that as a minor mod a million times. I mean, a million may be a exaggeration, but typically for us, when we've gone from a bigger footprint to a smaller footprint, that's been something we've done as a minor mod. I know this is a unique case where the structure is already constructed, but on face value, I don't see the difference between lessening the footprint that was approved as a minor mod for something that's going to be built from scratch, as opposed to lessening the structural footprint for something that's going to be moved onto the site. And I get lighting conditions and all of those things that we talked about that aren't necessarily on that order. I mean, I think you could certainly add a statement to a minor mod that says that all exterior lighting needs to be directed away from, from the water resource areas and compliant to the town code for exterior lighting.
That's fine.
Certainly. But this is something, again, I just, if we're gonna change directions on that, that's fine. I just want to be sure that we have the discussion to do that.
Right, and so from my perspective, I'm pleased that we could add that to the minor mod. And Seth, would you find that acceptable and propose the acceptance of the minor mod with that condition or added?
Well, seeing as the project representative has visibly agreed to that in the hearing, so it's on the record, I think that is fine in my opinion here.
Excellent. So on that note, is that a motion to approve this minor mod with conditions attached?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. And Seth, do you choose to second?
Yes.
Thank you. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain. Tim?
Sorry, aye.
That's all. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much. And I know under the extension order, we've just requested another year extension of the commercial wharf. It expires in October. And so that's on your agenda. That was the third part of this whole thing. So I don't know if that's something you can vote on now. I know it jumps in front of the queue like by 20 different orders of conditions, but that is on the agenda tonight. So, and I'll stick around for that.
Well, unless people object to the contrary, I'm happy to change the order. I can't imagine that there are members of the public who were waiting to jump in at that point. But Jeff, please tell me whether I can bend protocol or should I stick strictly to the...
I think while the discussion's fresh in everyone's head, this is totally fine.
Okay, great. So
End away.
Thank you. Okay, so Katie, continue on the Nantucket Boat Basin 29 Commercial Wharf extension of order.
Yeah, this is for the Meridian Cottage project, which was the rebuild of the entire bulkhead associated with Commercial Wharf, and then envision moving the Meridian off, rebuilding the seawall. It expires October, and we're holding it up because of this opportunity that came along. And so we just need another year. We don't need 3 years. We just need another year just to finalize this. We'd like to do all this work this fall and get it done, and then come in and get a certificate of compliance from you. So we do request a 1-year extension to the 29 Commercial Wharf order of conditions.
Thank you.
Got motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Joe. So on that note, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain, Tim, have you disappeared on us?
He stepped
I don't
off.
see
looks
him.
like.
You
I don't
stepped
see
off?
him.
No, okay. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that's 6 ayes and Tim Brain absent. So, okay, Katie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for dealing with all this, and I appreciate your support and the good conversations we had. So, okay. Good night.
Good night. So that brings us on to the second minor mod, Doherty ACK LLC, 4 Mariner Way, Paul Santos. And do I see Paul? I see Paul's iPhone.
He is here. We talked today, I believe he's actually going to be withdrawing and refiling this.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ian. Paul Santos. Yes, that's correct. We had
Okay.
a erroneous plan inserted into our initial application. We thought it best to withdraw and come back.
Okay. So, do I hear a motion to accept the withdrawal? Thank you, Joe. So moved. Mark Beal seconded. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
And I think Tim is off. So Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams.
I think it's withdrawal without prejudice, Mr. Chairman, if that's a friendly amendment.
Sure. Okay. Duly noted. So is that an aye?
Aye.
And Ian Golding, aye. And I think Tim, did you
back.
witness that? You're muted, Tim.
I think if we have the votes for it to carry, we can
Okay.
move on with that too.
Okay.
He just came back on.
I managed to move and turn my computer off in the process. Sorry.
Okay. So you're abstaining from this thing.
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay. Excellent. So then the third minor mod before us is Nantucket Islands Land Bank, 321 Paulpus Road. Rachel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I'm here tonight representing the Nantucket Islands Land Bank for a minor modification at our property at 321 Pulpus Road. We were just recently in with a notice of intent to remove artificial structures and man-made materials around a pond and sort of a wetland on the site. And after reviewing the site, we realized that we wanted to specify that we really need to be using machinery, such as like a mini excavator. And I believe I said we were going to be able to do it by hand, but it's too much to be able to remove that pond liner and the wood that is around the edges without any machinery. So I wanted to clarify that. And then at the same time, we were reviewing the site, and it was recommended that we remove a number of the smaller kind of unhealthy trees from the property to prevent overcrowding because it's pretty thick in there in some areas. And so we're requesting permission to remove about 24 small trees from the site in an effort to allow the larger trees to not be competing for light and resources. And that is what I have tonight for our minor modification.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Seth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, Rachel, if you know what species those trees are, and then if any of them happen to be invasive trees, I'd hope we would just get them, dealt with in the proper way.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a mixed variety of trees. I would not surprise me if one of them is a white poplar, but it's a mix of natives and non-natives, but nothing wildly invasive. But we would certainly make sure if there is a sycamore maple in there or a white poplar that we will make sure to dispose of it properly.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Rachel. So do I have a motion to approve a minor mod? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joe. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain.
All right, aye.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you very much.
So moves us on to a certificate of compliances, Larrabee at 13 Millbrook Road. And I
I got it. So this was for the installation of some split rail fencing along Millbrook Road on a vacant parcel that was there. Only a portion of the fencing was installed, and they're just wishing to close out the order. The sections that are there are in compliance. They're right along the edge of the roadway where they're supposed to be. So we're recommending that the certificate of compliance can be issued, and that will cease that permit.
Great, thank you. A motion to approve. Thank you, Joe. Do I see a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. By roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Kim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. That moves us on to Chakro Nominee Trust, 25 Quays Road. And Art Gasparo is on again, I believe.
That's all right. I can handle it for him if he wants to sit there and relax after he got beat up for the first half of the meeting. So
I'll stand by then. Thank you. If there's any questions.
so this one was just I don't want to make it sound simple. This was the replacement of an existing failing timber bulkhead with a sheet steel bulkhead. The bulkhead has been replaced, is constructed in compliance, all the elevations match correctly. There weren't any ongoing conditions that need to be carried forward, and we're recommending that that certificate can be issued.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Anything to add, Art? Nope. Okay. So a motion to approve, please. Thank you, Joe.
So moved. Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Kim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to orders of conditions. And Jeff, thank you for sending those out.
No problem.
And,
All right, we do have a few to kind of kick us off. I'll share my screen as we go through them. I meant to get them open before we started, but we got going too fast. So the first one we have was one we closed last time, Mr. Chair.
Right.
For 65 and 67 Easton.
Right.
Yeah. Do this every time. I get my screens all set up so when I like share and do stuff, it doesn't cause problems. And then we switch to do this and I always have to readjust. So 65 and 67 Easton was the land bank project for the constructed stormwater wetlands, the pathways, the signs, and some other stormwater infrastructure on those previously disturbed sites. I had in my notes to add a condition that all benches allow for the passage of floodwaters, have our standard fill conditions, and then some photo monitoring for the site. And then all plantings are native species.
Yeah, I think that addressed the benches addressed Seth's concerns last time.
Yeah, just a minor point. Can you just say native species with no cultivars?
Oh, sorry about that.
Thank you, Seth. So would you like to make a motion to approve as amended?
Aye.
Thank you. And for a second? Thank you. I think Joe just pipped you there, Mark. So Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg, Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that takes us on to what do we have?
Codfish?
Sorry?
Catfish. We ended up having to
Catfish.
continue the
Okay, yeah,
the biocontrol one because we're still waiting for Heritage.
right.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Playground.
Yeah, this was the
Codfish.
playground project.
Yeah.
I didn't have any special conditions on this one. Oh, sorry. I am.
no, and I think in our discussions, really, nothing was brought up.
But I feel like the one concern that was brought up was the contents of the walkway, the chemical composition of it, and I think Rachel addressed that. It seemed like.
Right, right. As did the two letters in the package at the end of the application. So, if I don't hear any amendments, would someone move to approve as drafted?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. And Joe, thank you for seconding. Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to Squam Road, 89 Squam Road.
Yes. Sorry, I have lots of conditions for this one. Nothing that's shattering. All right, so this is the one that was for the structure, pool, and patios that were there. Or provided the additional information related to soils and groundwater. So really it's kind of our standard pool package we've been issuing that's there. For where any pool water is drained to, chemical treatment limitations, which pool company is going to be treating, our exterior lighting condition, and then the plantings condition.
Never seen so many conditions.
This is kind of normal for pools now. This is
Yeah.
how we've
Gotcha.
broken them out over time. I will be 100% honest. I copied and pasted from a previous pool permit and made some tweaks site specific.
No,
They're relatively the
all
same.
good. All good.
Okay, so Marcus, does that translate into a motion to approve as drafted?
If you say so.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
one way to do it. I'll second that motion, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to, I believe, Roland, 3-4 Govett Lane.
Yes. So just real quickly, this was for this was Art's project on part of it with the structures partially within the flood zone. So there's the raising and renovation of the existing structure. I do have a finding just because the building department asked for this. I put them on a lot of filings, but I just like to call it out from time to time. There are two other structures on the plan that don't require our approval. They're outside of our jurisdiction. Other than that, I stuck pretty solidly to just our pretty standard conditions for projects like this.
Were there any paving stones added? Was there? No? Okay. So a motion to approve is drafted.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to 63 Halbert Avenue.
Ah,
So
sorry, I said my computer just had a little mini issue there. All right, same thing. It's, I don't want to say virtually identical to the last one because the addresses and things change, but similar projects and change from there.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
since structures are getting renovated, I request that we, oh no, this is limited subject to coastal storm flowage only, so no lighting issues here. Thank you.
No.
Sorry.
not at all.
All right, better to check.
So motion to approve is drafted, please.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Linda. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Seth. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So that brings us on to 21 Pilgrim Road and 4 Sophie's Way.
All right. This one's similar to the previous pool one where we have our standard set of pool conditions. Brought our lighting condition back that's here. Do have, again, the call out that there's a couple extra structures which are outside of the commission's jurisdiction. I'm not gonna lie, I did rack my brain pretty hard to think of stuff during the hearing about managing water on the site and just, I don't know. I think it's a planning and zoning issue from what we heard from the abutter, and I definitely am sympathetic to that. I just couldn't really think of anything to be helpful.
Right. Well, I think the author was appreciated your suggestion.
Yeah, and like always, I know Mr. Halley's still on. If he needs contact information for those folks, feel free to reach out to the office and we can get you contact information for those folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So,
Mr. Chair.
yes, Seth.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll let Jeff tell me if I'm wrong here, but I want to call out the spa that's on the plan here. And I know that it's technically outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer. But if you look at the plan of record, it appears to be, physically connected, or at least in the exact same layout to where the proposed pool is. And the Wetlands Protection Act allows us to mitigate the impact of structures that are outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer if they pose an impact to that buffer zone. So currently we have the conditions called out for the pool because the pool enters into the wetland buffer. But I think we have ample jurisdictional ability here to also call out the same conditions for the spa, given that it should be taken as one sort of connected unit. And I think we should exercise that authority.
Thank you, Seth. Jeff, that seems like a salient point.
Yeah, why don't, so Let me share again. Sorry, I just turned off my share to bring something up on my screen. Just to look at that again. So I think the easy way to do that is to come back into the permit overview to say permits of a pool. We'll add spa to that directly. And then any pool / spa. Because I would be willing to bet that you're probably right, Seth, that they'll either be like a waterfall from the spa into the pool, or they'll be connected in some way.
So that, does that mean that you're going to modify 20 and add, oh, you've got it already, pool spa, excuse me, my mistake.
So anywhere that I have referenced pool on that, I added the
great.
spa with it too.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. I think
Just
that's
one more at the
fair
end, the last part of 23.
I guess I should have been really lazy and just done like a find and replace with pool and added pool / spa and just let the computer fix it, but there'd have been like a plural or something that tripped it up. So
Great. So a motion to approve as amended, please.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I think Mark beat you to it, Linda, so I'll give you the second. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal,
Hi, sorry.
thank you, Mark. Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Klandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. That brings us on to 11 Osprey Way.
all right, 11 Osprey Way.
And Linda, are you recused?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Don't forget, Ian.
So I had that. Again, I called out the other structures that are on there. There's a lot of other structures outside of jurisdiction here. And then down below are normal things. And then I actually just had conditions that the cypress hedge located within the 100-foot buffer shall be replaced by native species with no cultivars. That the pathway to pond shall be no greater than 4 foot wide. Areas previously cut for a pathway or viewing corridor shall be allowed to revegetate naturally. And then our lighting condition for back there too. All the pools and stuff are on the other side of the house, so we can't really, they're out of jurisdiction.
Right, so could you, on 21, the pathway, that I think we discussed that and Mark agreed to no more than 3 foot wide.
The 3 foot wide was the boardwalk for Eel Point Road.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh dear.
It's all right. This is what you pay me, it's what I get paid for. Is to take notes as we go.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes.
So for 21, can we also amend that to say that the layout of that path shall be permanently staked and marked? Because if not, it's just going to get cut back wider in the future anyways.
Let's say 4 foot wide, Seth. Doesn't that count?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I mean, it says 4 foot wide, but if it's not staked and you have landscape crews go out there, they're just doing whatever, and there's a much more of an opportunity for it to get recut wider.
I will tell you from inspections, things tend to grow over time, and it's incremental. Like it'll be like the mower got an inch further over the first year, and then that inch turns into 2 inches, and they just progressively grow or shift. I think markers are a good idea.
Thank you, Jeff. So I was going to make a comment about the only things that shrink over time are elderly men and women, but I won't. So as chair, I'm not supposed to say things like that, right?
I
So
shrank when I was 12.
okay. All right. So, Aaron, on that note, so would a motion to approve as amended, please?
So moved.
Okay, so seconded by Joe. So Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Pandowski,
Aye.
Linda's recused, Ian Golding, aye. And that brings us on to 143 Eel Point Road.
All right, 1 second. Having a little issue here. All right. So I made some changes to this from the draft that I'm pretty sure I sent you. I thought I had made it, missed this one in the stack too. So the permit overview is a little bit funky. So the dwelling and elevated walkway with associated graded landscape utilities within coastal dune field and its buffer zone. An elevated walkway, man, I am always the worst one towards the end. Within coastal dune, waivers not required. So I also called out the plan does show coastal beach and land subject to coastal storm flowage. As you get there, the property ends at the water line, so it's not really necessarily in. Memorialize the elevated walkway shall be no greater than 3 foot wide. And then I added that one in, and then I have on our exterior lighting condition that we've been putting on.
So for permit overview, Jeff, perhaps if it read within a coastal dune field and then elevated walkway within a coastal dune, do you think that
so
would be grammatically correct?
The coastal dune isn't towards the very end. There's a significant portion of that walkway. So the walkway from the house to the state coastal dune is entirely within coastal dune field, which is a local resource area only.
I'm just suggesting an indefinite article for in front of both coastal dune field, preceding coastal dune field and preceding coastal dune, so that it reads within a coastal dune field.
Whatever happened to two by 10s? Now tacked together and running the whole length.
All right, I'll add your indefinite article.
Thank you. And Mark, I'm afraid it dates us. Those were the days. So. All right. So thank you, Jeff. So is this an amended order at this point? I would say it probably is. So
either or. It just
okay. Just so move to approve as drafted, please. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Tim. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Seth Engelborg.
Oh, he's recused from this one.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Joe Plandowski.
Aye.
Linda Williams.
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. And so that brings us on to 54 and 56 Meadowview Drive.
I don't think there was a lot here either.
No, this one is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Again, I just had our normal fill and lighting conditions for this one. It seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah. A motion to approve is drafted.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. Seconded by Joe. So by roll call vote, Mark Beal.
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding, aye. So, and we've already dealt with extensions of orders, so that brings us on to other business. And I don't believe we have minutes to approve.
No,
So-
Lisa and I are trying to get through them. It's just slow going.
Terry, where are you?
They're a month behind at the HDC, so if we're only a couple of meetings behind, we're doing pretty well.
And it's
Well,
just time consuming to do them.
right.
I really wish we could just like adopt the YouTube video and just say the minutes are the posted link. If you request a transcript of those, we'll provide it and just be like, here's the link. We're going to adopt it and be done. But apparently that is not sufficient.
Ready
So
for a
is there
motion?
no movement by the town to actually, appoint Terry's successor?
They're
we have-
advertising.
We have advertised for that position 2 times. And shockingly, it's not a highly desirable job. So
For monitoring reports,
I don't think we had any this time.
okay. Enforcement actions, potential enforcement actions. I think
Yeah,
you
there's one we're
addressed it.
looking into on Washington Street. I apologize. I had it written down. I lost my notes somewhere. Those remember it. It's across the street from the Mariah Mitchell Aquarium. It's the house that has the bright orange trim. If you look back through there,
Oh,
it
yeah.
looks like
Yeah.
someone did some cutting along the driveway. It looks like to probably improve the view shed. To get out of the driveway, but we're looking into it for sure. I've actually spoken to their, they're looking to do a filing some point in the future to their consultant about it. But we are looking into that a little bit further. But if someone has any info, I'll definitely take it.
Beth?
Is this 27 or 29 maybe? Is this the same one that we had an enforcement on a couple years back?
Yeah, it was the same one that a couple years ago, they cut down all of the Phragmites on the site without a permit and then let it regrow. It looks like coming out of the driveway, they trimmed back that vegetation again and got a little overzealous, but we're pulling it together. Yes, Mark.
Jeff, any feedback on our press release?
Nope.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good.
I know I heard through the grapevine that the people involved were not overly thrilled about it, but other than that, I haven't got any written correspondence or like nasty phone calls or anything. So,
I got accosted in the post office because we put the names in.
no, they know where to find me if they got the issues. I will say though, was just out there late last week, and the site looks really good. They've been really doing a good job in maintaining it so far. So hopefully they keep it up.
Apologies.
All right, we're on reports.
Okay, good. So, Crack? Okay.
Just real quickly, we've started discussions about coastal resilience districts as a concept for the island. And there'll be another discussion next week if you want to listen in. It's fairly complicated. There are a bunch of documents about other coastal resilience districts in other states that I think you can have access to if you're interested. So that's the only real news.
Thank you, Tim. CPC?
The meeting on Tuesday was canceled, so no action.
NP and EDC?
Nothing to report.
Linda, the harbor plan?
Just a reminder, next week, Wednesday, the 23rd, from 9 to 11 at Great Harbor, for public comments, and Same day, Wednesday, the 23rd, out at the Nantucket Admiralty for all the Nantucket people, from 5 to 7.
And at the yacht club, it's from 11 to 1, did you say?
No, Great Harbor is 9 to 11
9
to
to
catch the
11.
morning people, and then Nantucket Admiralty from 5 to 7.
Okay, thank you. The Joe, the offshore wind group?
Nothing to report. The last meeting was July of 2022.
Just
And-
breezing along there.
And at the rate those contracts are being canceled, there won't be much to talk about.
It's very unfortunate. And that was a terrible pun, Linda. So that moves us on to commissioners' comments.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
One question for Jeff, if I may.
Of course.
Any staffing updates for us, Jeff?
No, not right now. So
Thank you.
I will know a little bit more in another like week and a half. I'll have a better answer for that question.
Gotcha.
And so unless there's anything that you want to add, Jeff?
I was gonna say what Linda said. So good. Thank you
Okay.
for jamming it out. Look at us. We can get it out of here in under 3 hours.
Okay, granted, 5 minutes under 3 hours, but under 3 hours.
Okay, Linda, is that a motion to?
That's a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Keep putting words in people's mouths, Ian.
And well, what can I say?
Move it along.
Second.
And
Second.
for a second? Excellent. Thank you, Seth.
Second.
So on that note, Mark Beal,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Joe Plandowski,
Aye.
Linda Williams,
Aye.
Ian Golding. I thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Have a nice weekend.
You too.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you.